And that's when the light-skinned guy came up and grabbed me by my shoulder and said, "You're gonna follow me out to the parking lot without any issues. You're gonna get in the truck without any issues, and we're gonna go home without any issues," right? I don't think it had registered to me that I had been trafficked. But I was essentially just there to bait these men in to get robbed. I saw a lot of death during that time. And even though he was a pimp, he was the one who introduced me to God. A child that was not made out of love, but out of fear. Tear your body, scar your body. Most people would have thought that I was gonna look at that child and hate it, but instead I looked at that child and I've never loved anything more. If you really love me, why would you put me through all these things? If you're so great and so mighty, why me? I fought for my life until I felt this immense peace cover my body. It was this calming sound that said, "You know who you are, wake up." Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm 26 years old. I was born here in Dallas, Texas. I am a single mom with 2 beautiful children and a crazy story on how I got here. As much as I want to believe that 26 is a short time on this planet, which it is in hindsight, I've lived a lot of life, and I've lived about 4 different lives within this little short period of time. And so I'm excited for what God has next for the next 26 years. We can start all the way from the very beginning. I was born dead. I came out of my mom with no heartbeat, no pulse, no oxygen. I was blue. And they actually had declared that I was not going to survive until, I'm not too sure what they did, but I remember my mom telling me that they had put a needle, this long needle, inside my head, which did like some type of shock or did something to my brain, which essentially brought me back to life. And so now I have this really awesome birthmark where I have 1 strand of black hair, where the rest of my hair is naturally white and blonde. So growing up, I kind of loved that about myself. I was born a towhead, and if anybody knows what a towhead baby is, it is where we are born with white hair. I had pure white hair, blue eyes, and then I just had this 1 black strand of hair that grew. And my mom always called me the skunk of the family because that's what I look like. My name also resembled something. I was actually supposed to be named Samantha. My entire family knew me as Samantha up until the day I was born, until my mom seen me for the first time when I came out, and she then changed my name to Jordan because of my blue eyes that nobody thought that I was gonna have. So she named me Jordan after the river. And it is something I've also kind of grown to be proud of in hindsight. But growing up, I started off as your typical suburban kid. We lived in Grapevine, Texas, in a nice little middle-class neighborhood. Had a mom and a dad. And from the outside, my life looked picture perfect. I was in cheerleading, I was in gymnastics, I played every sport. My mom made sure that I stayed busy. But behind the scenes that nobody really talked about was, it was very abusive inside the home. My father had a lot of anger issues, and had a lot of resentments towards my mother in particular. And so he would take those resentments out on me. He used to play like little games with me. He was never like just directly abusive, but he was very mentally and physically, but he did it in ways of like games. Some of the memories I have of where he would want to play hide and seek with me, but he would tell me that I could only hide in certain places, such as closets, dog cages, stuff like that. And when I would go into those things, he would then lock me in there. And I would be in there for hours until my mom would get home from work. And then he would play games where, like, if my mom wasn't looking, he would take me from the back and he would hold my nose and my mouth closed and see how long it would take for me to pass out. Just things like that. And every time I would try to tell my mom what was going on, my mom always came back of that I was being dramatic, or I was making it up, or he was just playing and I need to toughen up. And so I grew up just thinking that it was normal, that this was just how dads played with their little girls, and I just tried to keep, I guess, a positive mindset against it as a child, not realizing how much weight was being carried and how much guilt I felt, especially when the divorce happened. When the divorce happened, I was about 8, 9 years old, and where most children are really sad that their parents are divorcing, I was relieved. I was actually excited that my dad didn't come back home, because for me it was safety. I felt safe. Even though my mom wasn't like the perfect mother by any means, she wasn't somebody that I feared at the time. She was somebody that I still looked at as a mother that would not hurt me. But my mom was still a young mom, and my mom was a struggling mother. She did not work when my dad was around, so when my dad left, he left her with nothing. And so we lost everything. I don't love to think about it, but I think about it a lot. I remember coming home from school. I used to walk to school back and forth, and I remember walking home from school, and I remember the house that I grew up in. I'll go up to the front door, and the door was locked, and it had one of those big locks that I'd never seen before on the door. And back then we didn't have phones, we didn't have iPhones and stuff yet. You know, even though I'm 26, I feel like I'm old when I say that. So I had no way to call my mom to figure out what was going on, and my mom came home about 4 hours later. I had just been chilling outside, and we had been evicted, and we had no access inside the house. And so my mom had no other choice but to call my dad's family, and we had to move all the way to Bonham, Texas, to go live there until my mom could be able to figure financials out. So my entire life was stripped at that moment. Lost my friends, my house, my toys, everything. Went to the middle of nowhere, Texas, and had to go to a school that was redneck, to say the least. And again, I'm a suburban kid. I had no idea what I was walking into. I was bullied harshly. Everybody picked on me. I was the city girl. I didn't fit in. So already kind of being in an awkward situation of being a new kid, also not being liked, was definitely played a huge role. And then it got worse while staying at my grandparents'. My grandfather, it started small. It was small things where he would accidentally walk in on me in my room while I was changing. or he would accidentally come into the bathroom while I was showering. Then it started turning into, while I was taking a bath, he would come in and talk to me. And it just progressively got more and more to where one day he had invited me out to his barn. And I liked to go out there because all the horses, and I loved horses back then, and he told me I could go and brush the horses' manes and feed them and stuff and go ride the four-wheeler. So what 10-year-old little girl doesn't want to go do that? And I was on the four-wheeler, and he asked me if I wanted to take him around the field. So he hopped on the back of the four-wheeler. And he began to grope me and essentially had me inside that barn. And as a 10-year-old girl, I knew what was happening was wrong. I knew what was happening wasn't supposed to be happening. But as a 10-year-old girl, I also didn't understand why this was happening. And so immediately I told my mom, and my mom was furious, as any mother would be. And my mom contacted my father, and my father was also furious and had informed my mother that this wasn't his first time doing this. He had done it to my aunts, he has done it to cousins, which made my mom even more mad because she was, why would you allow us around him if you knew these things? And we got kicked out because my grandmother, on the other hand, loved her husband. And a 10-year-old girl was capable of lying about being raped. So I was a liar. And so they kicked my mother and I out. My mom and I lived in a motel in Paris, Texas. My mom lost her job, and we had nowhere to go. And at that time, I felt like everything was my fault. I had put all the blame onto myself. And to make matters worse, my mom also had a lot of resentments because she too felt like it was my fault. Not to the extent of what had happened, but what happened caused us to be in this situation. And she was very vocal about that to me. We managed to make it back to Louisville, Texas. And my mom was able to get an apartment. And that's kind of when my life began to essentially change. My mindset changed, my friends changed, the atmosphere changed in my life. I went from being this really happy, girly girl, cheerleader, fun girl to very gothic, I wanted to listen to dark music, wore dark clothes. I was very depressed all the time. And of course, my mom thought I was just a preteen and was just going through a phase. Thought I was just trying to be fashionable or whatever. And not knowing that when I was going to school, I was being heavily bullied because of the way I looked and the way I dressed. I also lied a lot. I don't know, I went through this phase of lying. I felt like I had to lie about my life. We lived in a very poor side of town, but I went to school where it was a very mixed school. Like you had some poor people, but you also had some really wealthy people, like wealthy kids that lived in the nice houses. Like we all kind of went to the same school. And so I would lie about my life saying silly things like that I had a brother or that I had lots of friends, stuff like that, when really I was alone. Especially during this time, my mom had found a full-time job, and so she actually left before I ever went to school and didn't come home until after school. And so I was alone essentially all day by myself from the age of 11 to teenage years. And so doing what most kids do when they're left alone, and I started getting in trouble. I started doing just rambunctious stuff. I got really into skateboarding. I was like the skater girl, and I just was hanging out with all the skater kids, and most of them were older than me. So I started partaking in like smoking. Started off with cigarettes, and then it started into weed, and then I started drinking and just getting in trouble at school. I was ditching school, and by the time I was 12, I went to juvenile detention for the first time. I was arrested outside of my house. My mom had called the police on me because I would sneak out. I would run away, sneak out. So she would call and say that I was a runaway, and they picked me up and they took me in. I spent, the first night was only 24 hours. I went to court, got released the same day. You know, it was kind of a slap on the wrist of don't do it again. But then I did it again, and my mom called the police again, got arrested again. Between the ages of 12 and 14, I had gone to juvenile detention roughly 13, 14 times. And going into juvenile detention that many times, and it was no longer 24 hours anymore. It was 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I had missed so much school. I had lost any friend that I had on the outside were no longer really my friends because I would disappear for weeks on end. So again, I'm starting back at the bottom. No friends, no education, no social life. And I was pretty much deemed this bad kid. And so starting into high school, my freshman year, I went to a new school. I had met a couple of friends, but they were all just like me. The troublemakers, the potheads, the skaters, the thugs. Those were my friends because those were the people that I would consistently see in juvenile. We would always be sitting across the hall from each other. So when we found out we were all going to the same high school, of course you're going to connect with them. And of course we're going to get in more trouble with each other. And that was exactly what we did. I mean, I was in every program y'all can think of. I never even went to a real class. I'll be honest, I was in school suspension every day. I was in detention every day. High school was definitely when things like escalated a lot. Since being at such a young age, I was super like anti-sex. Like I was a lot more tomboyish. I actually came off as a lot more masculine. I wore basketball shorts and big t-shirts, and I didn't want anybody having a crush on me. If you had a crush on me, I thought you were weird. And I would tell you you were weird. And I was just the type of girl I was. But there was this one boy that I really liked, but my mom could not stand him because he was a thug in her eyes. He was the school drug dealer, but I liked him because he was the first person that I talked to about my life and that I didn't feel condemned by because he actually was going through worse. His mother and father both passed away from drugs, and he lived with his grandmother. And I'll never forget, he never would invite anybody to his house. He would always say, well, his grandma didn't like nobody at the house. But one day he looked at me, he always walked me home from school, and he looked at me, he's like, do you want to come to my house? And I said, really? He's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. But then he looked at me in my eyes and said, but please keep this between you and me. And I was kind of confused on why he was saying that to me. But it hit me so hard because I remember walking into his house and the smell of his house was a smell that I don't wish anybody to ever smell. He had no electricity, no running water, and you could tell he had been living by himself for a long time. Mind you, we're freshmen in high school. And I remember he looked at me and he started crying. He's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, what's going on? Why are you living like this? And he then had admitted to me at that point that his grandmother had passed away 2 weeks ago and is still upstairs in the upstairs room. And he hadn't told anybody about it because she was the only person that he had left. And I just remember staring at him like, I don't know what to do. This is the environment that we live in, you know? And I remember trying to figure something out without getting the school involved and all this stuff. And he told me, he's like, you know, I got like 3 warrants out for my arrest right now. The reason I've been selling drugs is so I can, you know, be able to pay for food and get stuff for myself. And I just remember calling up my best friend and just being like, we need somewhere to stay. And another good friend of mine had opened his apartment up. We just started staying at this random kid's house. I had a warrant out for my arrest at this point. I was once again deemed as a runaway. And because I was gone for a good 3 months. I didn't go back home for at least 3 months, staying at this kid's house. And I still went to school, though. I was still going to school. But the last time I got arrested, I was 15. And it was bad. It was a bad arrest. Staying at that kid's house. I remember calling my grandparents for something, and they had tracked the phone call, which is when the police had found me. I was in a Burger King parking lot at 1 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to go get one of those bacon burgers. And I remember walking across the fence to get to the Burger King, and I just see all these cop cars just sitting right there. And me being the hoodlum that I was, I ran. I took off the other way. And I mean, it was a good 30-minute chase. I think I did something there. I think I was pretty fast at one point in my life. But they tackled me. My mugshot is hilarious. I thought, okay, I'm gonna stay here for a couple of months. Not gonna do much. And nope. I went to that courtroom and that judge was tired of seeing me. She looked at me and said, this is gonna be the last time I see you because you are gonna be sent to the Texas Youth Commission, which is the prison for minors. And she sentenced me 3 years in Texas Youth Commission. And I remember thinking to myself, why? I'm a runaway. I don't do anything bad. I smoke weed here and there. I drink here and there. But I don't do anything. Why are you sending me to prison? And even as a kid, I used to sit there and like really be upset about it. I'm like, why won't y'all maybe actually evaluate this? You clearly see I don't like being home. Maybe you should figure out why I don't want to be home. Why am I continuing to be a runaway? But that's when I learned how the system works. And I had to wait for 3 months before my process date to be able to go to the Texas Youth Commission. So in that 3 months, I was waiting patiently to be told I got to serve another 3 years. And just feeling like my life was just over. I just felt like you're taking my entire teenage years away from me. No sweet 16, no prom, no homecoming, no nothing. As a kid, I couldn't fathom how this happened, but I remember it was the day I was supposed to be loading up to go to the Texas Youth Commission. I had all my things packed. They told me my bus was gonna be arriving at 1 p.m. And it did, but I remember it was this small white bus. I go out there and I'm like, why? And it said Vernon on the side of it. And I was like, Vernon? What's in Vernon? And they're like, well, we ended up finding you a plea deal. Instead of serving 3 years in the Texas Youth Commission, we're sending you to a facility called Vernon, and it's a program. So I get into the truck, and it was hot, had no AC, and it was a 4-hour drive. Both my feet and my hands were handcuffed, and then they're handcuffed together. So the ride was very uncomfortable. Every turn, your whole body's moving. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, what is this program? Like, they're treating me like I'm just this mass murderer. Like, why am I going through all this? I remember when I first walked in feeling like I didn't belong in this place. So they had different units. So it was a huge facility that was for both boys and girls. Now the boys stayed in their own buildings, and then the girls stayed in their buildings. But during different meetings and stuff, we would all come together. So it's not necessarily like a prison. We also got to wear real clothes. We didn't have to wear jumpsuits. We could have our real clothes, our real shoes. So that was also nice. But it was still also like prison to where like you couldn't have certain hygiene stuff. You couldn't have anything in your rooms. Like all your hygiene stuff had to stay like in a closet. You had to ask for it. You had to get money on your books to be able to buy certain things, like all of that. So, but I remember when I pulled up and I went into my building, I was in the anger management side. So there was the drug addict side and there was the anger and mental side. I was on the anger and mental side, which again, I was just trying to figure out, why am I here? Because I remember walking in, and the moment I walked in, I just heard screaming and fighting and just, every curse word in the book was being said. Everybody was affiliated with a gang. Everybody was, had something major going on. And I had a roommate who didn't speak any English, but she had tattoos from her forehead all the way down. Her eyelids were tattooed. And she was part of the cartel gang. And she didn't like me very much. When I first got into the room, she just kept staring at me. Was probably saying some really bad things, but again, didn't speak any English, so I personally don't know what she was saying to me. She didn't have a pleasant tone, so I'm assuming it wasn't very nice. Just try to stay out of the way. The first couple of weeks were really hard because I was the new girl and I was soft looking. I just tried to stay quiet, out of the way, until one day I was walking down the hallway to go take my shower. I go into the shower room, and the shower that I was supposed to be in was still running. And I didn't want to move the curtain because I assumed somebody was in there because I saw feet. And so I went back to the concierge and was like, well, there's somebody still in that shower. Can you please, put me somewhere else? And the concierge was like, there's nobody in that shower. And I'm like, yes, there is. She's like, no, go back or just go tell him to get out. So I go and I move the curtain to tell the girl to get out. And that is when I noticed that the girl had unalived herself inside the shower. And I didn't really process it right then. It was just kind of like, I just remember thinking like, oh, closing the curtain, going back to the concierge, and I said, y'all probably want to go check on her. Is all I was able to get out was, y'all need to go check on her. And they're like arguing with me, and I just couldn't express it. The inhumanity of the whole situation was, again, I'm not even 16 yet, and to experience death, and then for them to just kind of be very nonchalant about it, like, okay, well, we're gonna go figure this out, but you still need to go take your shower. So I had to go take my shower in the next shower over. And then, like, nobody checks up on me, like, hey, are you good? Like, it was just, go back to your room. And it was my roommate. So that was my first, like, month in Vernon. After that, it was kind of a slippery slope. There was lots of fighting, a lot of, like I said, I mean, I was in the anger unit, so there was fights happening every day until this one counselor came. His name was Keith. Man, I loved Keith. Keith was just mean. He was just a mean guy, but he was mean in a funny way. Like, he always put you in your place, but you could tell he did it out of love. Like, he genuinely loved everybody, but he also wasn't going to take anything from anybody. Keith was my knight in shining armor because he was the first adult in the situation that actually came and talked to me and would sit me down and tell me that I was silly and tell me that I was not all that, and but in a loving way, and telling me that I was actually a good kid, that I wasn't a bad kid. When Keith came onto the unit, things really started to change. Like, he was a lot more strict. The fighting stopped. Like, it was crazy. The fighting just kind of started going away. I think having a male on the unit just kind of changed the dynamic. We had these meetings called milieu where you had to hold yourself or others accountable. We had to go over and stuff, and they also did level up, so you had levels. And this is what the program was, is you start off as a level 1, and then you become a level 2, and then once you become a level 3 is when you get your release date. And your release date is usually 6 weeks once you become a level 3, but you have to maintain that level 3. But when you become a level 2 is when you can actually start going to school. And they had a school, a campus on the unit. And so I got leveled up to a level 2 after 6 months of being there. So I finally got to go get my education. I got to finally go out to recess and go outside and be a human again. I had my 16th birthday while I was a level 2. And I had made friends at this point. That was my little clique. And we always got excited to see each other. We had a prom. We had talent shows. I mean, it was like a little high school, but it was just all these kids that were wrong place, wrong time kids. All these kids, all these people that I met through Vernon had some really crazy, touching stories. I actually felt like I was like the innocent kid in this situation compared to some of these kids. Which is why I have the heart that I have today, where I'll take a convicted felon over anybody else. I still have that love, that heart, because I do believe that everybody has a story. Nobody just woke up a criminal. It led somewhere. So then I finally managed, after another 3 months as a level 2, I became a level 3. I received my release date. At this point, I was there for almost a year, a little less than a year. And I was super hyped. I was super excited. I was like, ooh, I'm about to get out. I'm about to be good. No. No, there was this new girl that came. Her name was Jessica. And Jessica was a fireball. She came in those doors swinging, ready to fight everybody. And one of those people that she really wanted to fight was me. Because being a level 3, I was essentially like a leader. And so I was the one who had to like do the different groups and different stuff. And she didn't like me very much for that, because she was like, who are you? So Jessica and I got into it in the cafeteria one day. And we didn't go get physical. It was just verbal. But that verbal conflict got me docked back to a level 1. Still gets me angry to this day. I was so mad. I got my release date and everything. Got docked back to a level 1. Couldn't go to school anymore. And took me another 5 months to get back to a level 2. And it took me another 9 months to get me to a level 3 again. But during that time, Jessica and I became friends, acquaintances. And I think after almost 2 years, I was officially released. And Jessica got released a little after me. So we all kept in contact, but Jessica wanted to hang out with me and stuff because she lived close to me. And I wasn't allowed to be released back to my mom, but I would go see my mom. But I was released back to my grandparents at first. But then, of course, my grandparents, you know, I was still a teenager. So, you know, we didn't have the best relationship. So my mom had offered for me to come live back with her. And I was scared to go live back with my mom. So I did what I was good at, and I ran away. This time I ran off with Jessica, because Jessica had told me that her brother and her were going to Houston to go to a birthday party, and that she wanted me to go with her. So I packed my bags up, waited all night for them to arrive, and I got into the car. And the moment that I got into that car was when I realized that that was the start of the rest of my life. The man that was in the car was not her brother. He didn't talk to me. He didn't really say much to me. But Jessica talked to me the whole way to Houston, like as if we were back in Vernon. I remember sitting in the back seat and just kind of feeling weird. Like I had ran away before, I had done all these things before, but this particular one, like there was something unsettling, and I couldn't figure it out. So we get to Houston, and I remember going to the hood of Houston. There was these apartments that we went to, and it was this Hispanic lady that was inside the apartment, and she kept saying that she was this guy's girlfriend, but she was like way older. Like he was in his maybe 30s, and he wasn't young, but she was like 50s. I mean, she was way older. And Jessica told me that they were going to go to the club or whatever, and that I needed to wait. And the Hispanic lady had came over with a couple of drinks and offered me a drink, and I took it. And I just remember starting to feel like really weird. Like I remember sitting on the couch and just feeling like my chest and everything was just going back into the couch. But I couldn't lift myself up. I was just sinking. And I remember feeling really tired. And then I blacked out. I woke up naked on top of a bed. And Jessica was next to me, also naked. And I had asked her, like, what had happened, and she just kind of giggled and said, "Oh, you're good." And I kind of just tried to play it off, like maybe I just got really drunk. And she's like, "Well, we need to hurry up and get ready and go to this club." So I put on the clothes that I had, and we go to this club. And I remember, again, I'm underage. I'm like still underage. I'm 16. I was 16. I remember going into the club and sitting in this table, and they had drinks, and I just remember I was like having anxiety because of what just happened. And I was still trying to figure out, like, I just drank one drink. Like, I must be really lightweight, so I'm not going to drink. But they kept like pushing these drinks to me, and I didn't want to drink. And it was the guy, Jessica, and this other guy now. He was this light-skinned, tall guy. And they kept looking at me. These two gentlemen were like talking, but they were across the table, so I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they kept looking at me and then talking and then looking at me and then talking. Next thing I knew, I remember seeing Jessica and this guy. They got up from the table, so I got up, and Jessica turned to me and looked at me and said, "You can't come with us." And I asked her why, and she said, "You're gonna get taken care of." And that's when the light-skinned guy came up and grabbed me by my shoulder and said, "You're gonna follow me out to the parking lot without any issues. You're gonna get in the truck without any issues. And we're gonna go home without any issues," right? And I wanted to scream. I wanted to run away until I felt something cold pressed up against my back. So I went out to the parking lot without any issues, got into the truck without any issues, and went home with this strange man without any issues. Again, I don't think it had registered to me that I had been trafficked. He made me dye my hair. I was a blonde. He made me dye my hair jet red. I remember him taking me to the beauty supply store and getting me extensions because my hair was like this long. So he got extensions that went all the way down to my hip. He bought me all these different outfits, like fishnet outfits and little tea backs and bras and heels. And then he took me to the house and put me on top of a bed and told me to pose. And back then there was this website. It was a feeding ground for prostitution. And he took my pictures, uploaded them, and I started making calls. My first experience will always forever haunt my brain because it was this old man. He had crystal blue eyes. I had met him at a motel. He had walked in, and I thought that I was gonna have to sell myself to this man. But what ended up actually happening was I was a clickbait. And what a clickbait is I was a really pretty girl that they knew would get a lot of hits, a lot of clicks, and a lot of meetups. But I was essentially just there to bait these men in to get robbed. I saw a lot of death during that time, a lot of unnecessary death. I did that for a couple of months, and it wasn't all the time. Most of the time it was always setups. Between that time, it wasn't just that light-skinned guy. It was also like this other guy that had dreads and this Hispanic guy. They kind of all were in relations with me. They just kind of tossed me around wherever I needed to be at. And then I remember, again, I didn't have God in my life, so I didn't understand what was going on. But I remember it was right after a date, and I was in the backseat of a car. Mind you, this car, to describe it, was all black tinted windows. I mean, I could barely see out. And I remember they pulled up to a gas station, stopped to go inside to go grab some stuff. And I was sitting in the back seat, and this man pulled up next to me. He was in an Escalade. And it was him and this white girl that got out. And being now in the prostitution ring, I could tell exactly what they were. I knew it was a pimp and a prostitute. But the girl was so pretty. And she had all this jewelry on and had her nails and her hair done. I mean, she was top tier. Beautiful girl. And I just remember looking at her and just being like, dang. And I guess they could feel me looking. I don't know. To this day, I don't know how they knew I was in this car. But when they came out, they didn't even seem like they even they just walked right past, got into the car, Next thing I know, I heard a knock on the window, and I look over and it's the girl. And I slightly roll the window down because I didn't want my folks to be like, what's going on? And she threw in a card and said, when you're ready, call us. I put the business card in my shoe, went back to this place. The people I was with, they had stayed in like this townhome. And I knew I wanted to get out, but I didn't know how. And I didn't know anybody's phone number, but I knew the number on the card. And even though it was another pimp, I think in my mind I thought to myself, I would rather be treated the way that she was being treated than what I was being treated like. So I called that number, and a man answered. And let's just call him Jake. Jake answered the phone. He asked me where I was. I told him I didn't know, but I described. And by my description, he knew exactly where I was. And he asked me, how badly do you want to get out? I said, really bad. He's like, all right. Are you in a situation that I need to kill over? Or do you think you'd just be able to walk out? And I said, you're going to have to kill over me. I'm their only white girl. I'm their clickbait. They're not going to let me go very easy. So the next day, I acted like I had a date, and I told them that they were going to come to the townhome that we were at. Sometimes I'd had clients that would come there because he would be too drunk or whatever to take me anywhere anyways. And this white boy showed up. Let's call him Mike. Mike showed up and knocked on the door and pretended that he was a client, which I actually thought he was. He was good at his acting skills. Came in and told the guy that, he was there for a certain amount of time, and went upstairs. Once we got upstairs, I'm thinking this is actually a client until he turned around and said, where are your bags? Caught me off guard. I was like, oh. It's like, yeah, where are your bags? And then next thing I know, I heard gunshots downstairs. And Mike wasn't fazed. He was just standing by the door, and he told me to wait until the ruffling stopped. And then when I got downstairs, I saw Jake. And he said, are you ready? I said, yeah. And I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And it was a lot. It was a lot. But I got into the car with them, and that's when Jake had turned to me and told me that I just remember he was like smirking and giggling, like he was like this was every day for them. Turn around and he's like, yeah, you got a lot of debt to pay, but I know that you'll be a good girl and you'll pay it all off. So a couple weeks went by. He had me staying in an in-home suites, kind of like a budget suites, but a little nicer. They're 2-story. He didn't want me prostituting myself online because of what happened. He didn't want anybody tracking where I was or anything like that. So instead, what he did was he had me go into a strip club and get hired as a waitress because I was still a minor, so I couldn't get hired on as a dancer. But they hired me on as a waitress, and but I still essentially had to pick up dates and stuff like that. And I also was a tab keeper for the other girls that were under him. There was about 3 other girls that worked in that particular club. And I just was the person that just made sure that they were getting to work on time, stuff like that. He would text me and ask. It was cool from there. He wasn't abusive. He didn't hit me or do anything. We had consensual sex a lot. It was consensual to him. I just didn't want to get in trouble. That went on for about 6 months or so, I want to say, until I started gaining a lot of weight and getting sick. And it's like right before my 17th birthday, I just remember being so sick, and I was so scared on why I was so sick. I mean, every day I was just waking up, the room was spinning, my stomach was always hurting. I thought I was dying. But then I wanted to go home. I remember I wanted to go home because I was scared. I really felt like I was dying. And so I'll never forget that day. I was so slick. I'm proud of myself for this one. I was slick with it. So I wasn't allowed to have a phone, like a real working phone with him. Like I had a phone that I could text and stuff, but I wasn't allowed to have like a call. I couldn't call, I couldn't do anything because it had like minutes on it. And he would always check my minutes. So I'll never forget, I was going through, I had like a journal or something, and it just so happened to have my grandparents' phone number in it. Mind you, I've had this journal on me, but it was like out of nowhere, I was like flipping through the pages and my grandparents' phone number was on one of the pages. And it wasn't in my handwriting. It was like in their handwriting. I remember I had like snuck out and like, I remember I had no shoes on because I just like ran out of the townhome place real quick while he was taking a shower. And I remember there was a Radio Shack right across the street, and I ran to that Radio Shack and I asked the guy if I could use his phone, and he said yes. And I called my grandparents and I told them where I was. I said, I'm off of Camp Wisdom, and there's these apartments and these townhomes and there's these hotels. And at the end of Camp Wisdom, there's a Regio's and a laundromat. Meet me at the Regio's, please. And so they agreed. I told Jake that I was running to the laundromat to go do some clothes, because where the laundromat was and where the Regio's was like right across the street from each other. So I told him I was going to go to that laundromat to go do some clothes real quick. And so of course he like followed. He didn't follow me, but he had his goons follow me. So then I had to like kind of pivot and be like, I'm going to go over to Regio's real quick. And so I went over to the Regio's, and my grandparents were there with my cousin. I don't think they knew what they were about to be walking into, but they had my little cousin with me. And I knew the goons were watching, so I had to be careful on like what I was saying and all that, but I was really trying to word to them like, help me. Like, you know where I'm at now. Come back for me. Figure this out, please. But help me. And I don't know. I think a part of me is, I guess, like the Hollywood in me. Because at the time, I felt like I was living in this movie. Thought that my grandparents would have called the police or would have stood their ground and told me to get in the car, and whoever they had to fight, they would, whatever. And they didn't. They left me. And it's something that I still struggle with to this day of, like, if it was one of my kids, I'm not leaving at Regio's. I would not leave without my baby. But they left me. And I got in a lot of trouble for that Regio visit. I got in so much trouble. And see, Jake's punishment, and excuse if this sounds really vulgar, Jake's punishment wasn't to physically abuse me. He was a sexual abuse. he really hurt me. I was so young, too. I was so young. But he really hurt me. And he wouldn't take me to the hospital. So I tried it again. I kept pursuing my freedom. I remember it was the same day that the club that I was working at got shut down. They got raided. And it was a perfect opportunity. I took the opportunity and ran with it. What happened was I was at work, and the manager came to me because the manager knew I was underage, and he knew that the raid was about to happen. And so he told me to leave. He's like, you need to get your stuff, you can get your clothes on, you need to go now. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, they're about to raid. If they catch you in here, it's going to be, everybody's going to get in trouble. So I left, but I didn't tell Jake. So where the club was, there was another strip club next door. And I just went right over to that strip club, asked the manager if I could use his phone. The manager said no. So then I started walking around until I found a motel. Went into that motel, asked to use the phone. They said yes. Called my grandparents, and my mom answered the phone. And my mom was angry because I didn't remember her phone number. But my mom, while I was still on the phone, I could hear her packing her stuff up and getting in the car. And I told her where I was. I tried my best to describe where it was. It took her about an hour to find me, but she found me. She picked me up and took me home. When I got home, it was a bittersweet moment. My mom had printed missing pictures of me, and I posted them everywhere. I was one of those Walmart kids. Just thinking about like the fear my mom had, the guilt. My mom searched for me every day. But I had to stay with my grandparents because, my mom just didn't want to like push too much buttons at that time. I didn't want to be at my grandparents either because of the stunt they pulled. But I also didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was scared. I want to say a couple of weeks had passed, and I was eating a lot. Because I just thought I had just been starving. I was eating a lot, and I was gaining all this weight. And my Nana was the one who was like, "You're pregnant." And I'm like, "Please don't say that to me. No, I'm not." And sure enough, yes, I was. I was pregnant. I wanted to have an abortion. My grandparents were okay with me getting an abortion in the sense of how this baby was conceived. Not knowing who the father was, and even the potentials of who the father was. They were pimps. But my mom was the one who fought me about it. She was the one who sat down with me and begged me and was like, it's not that child's fault. You will love that child. God has blessed you with that child, and you need to take it for what it is. So at the age of 17, I gave birth to my baby boy, Keaton. He came out, he was a 7.5-pound baby, but he was long and skinny, big old hands and big old feet, and he had a cone-shaped head. I'll be making fun of him to this day about it. And I was loving my life. I had a natural birth with him. So I felt every single thing. I felt him coming out. And when you feel a child that was not made out of love, but out of fear, tear your body, scar your body. Most people would have thought that I was going to look at that child and hate it. But instead, I looked at that child, and I've never loved anything more. The first time holding him on my chest and feeling his heart, heartbeat and feeling his little fingers touch me, I know now that God gifted me a son to show me what love was like, what unconditional love was like. And that's exactly who he is too. To this day, that little boy is the most gentle, kind, just amazing. He's a huge boy, but he is a gentle giant. And he's gonna go very far in life. Yeah, had him at 17. First year was hard. I didn't get along with anybody in my family. I had a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And on top of everything, I was just processing what I had gone through. But I couldn't process it with my family because my family didn't understand, nor did they want to hear what I had gone through. To this day, I can't, my family doesn't know my testimony. They know it, but they don't know it because they can't hear it. They don't want to hear it, which I understand. It's a guard, but when you're trying to process something, it was hard. It was very hard to try to process it alone on top of being a new teenage mother. The mental toll it took on me, I can't even describe it. I was very suicidal. I had panic attacks every day, had just different, it was a lot to deal with. So much so that I turned to drugs. I started doing really hard narcotics to try to numb the pain that I was feeling, both mentally and physically. Started neglecting my son to be able to go out and do these drugs. And being in the environment of doing these drugs and being numb to the pain, so then essentially forgetting the pain, was I wound myself right back where I was. I did not know my worth yet at this time. I thought the only thing that I was good for was sex.
I was a pretty face and that was it. I was a nice body and that was it. And because I was only a pretty face and a nice body, I wasn't just going to give my body for free. So I had convinced my mom to take me up to the strip club.
I actually did go into the club with the intentions of becoming a waitress. I had just turned 18, literally. We went about a week and a half after my birthday, my 18th birthday. So I went in with the intentions to become a waitress. So I wasn't lying to my mom per se, but I was kind of hoping that they would I don't know. But I walked in, sat down in the lobby, told them I was there to get a job. They asked me waitress or dancer. I said waitress. The floor girl kind of just looked me up and down and was like, okay. And then the waitress manager came out, looked at me up and down and said, no, be right back. Went and grabbed the dancing manager, and it was a woman. She came out and said, either you take a risk or you don't. I won't hire you if you want to be a waitress, but I'll hire you if you want to be a dancer. And I just kind of sat there for a minute, was like, you can't tell this complete stranger of everything you had just gone through. But I just said, all right. Went back outside to my mom, told her I got the job, and told my mom the truth. I said, I didn't get hired as a waitress. I got hired as a dancer. And she was just kind of like, I think my mom just didn't want to start any issues with me. But I do remember the advice that my mom gave me in the car was, she said, treat this like college. Give yourself 4 years. Get in, hustle hard, get out. Give yourself 4 years. And I remember joking and saying, I don't need 4 years. I'll get out in a year. Boom, boom. I wish I got out in a year. Went back to that club, and pretty quickly I adjusted. I think just with prior lifestyle and also working in a strip club already, I had already kind of had the knowledge and experience And I just hit the ground running, essentially. I got exposed to a lot of stuff in that first year of dancing. And I just remember thinking that I made the right decision. And I also remember thinking to myself that this was just who I was meant to be. My first year of dancing, I did everything under the sun. I still prostituted. I still did extra dates, but it was a lot more upscale now. Is now considered an escort. Being an escort, I got to go to all these really fancy restaurants and dinners and places, and got to meet more higher class clientele. Got to meet people that I never thought that I was ever going to meet. I can't say their names, but here we are. And by the time I was 20 in the club industry, again, I said I was going to be there in a year, but 2 years went by really fast. I had then began to modify my body. I had gotten, breast augmentation. I was Botoxed up. I had gotten like different fat transfers, cool sculpting. I was driving a pink Maserati. I had a Mercedes. I got me and my son our first big apartment. My son had a Rolls Royce toy. Was only repping name brand stuff. Had his first gold chain. All these things. And I felt like I was living the life that I deserved. I had officially became the image that the world wanted me to be. And I was dragging my son right behind me. Now, of course, during that time of those 2 years, I was independent for the first 6 months until I met King. King came into my life, and I knew he was a pimp when I first met him, but something about King was familiar to me. And even though he was a pimp, he was very spiritual. He was very godly. God came first to him before everything else. And he was the one who introduced me to God. I've heard of Jesus in my life before King, but growing up, we were the Easter and Christmas church people. But he was the one who taught me to pray before every meal. Every time I came home with money, he always made me bless the money and pray over the money to continue for abundance. And I remember thinking to myself how silly it was. And I always asked him, like, why are you so godly, but you're in this lifestyle? And he always had these really prophetic messages to tell me. He wasn't a Christian by any means. He was, a lot more spiritual based. He believed in the third eye. He believed in the chakras. So that's why I just never really listened. I mean, I listened, but I didn't listen to him. I kind of looked at him as hypocritical, some of the things that he would say. But I did begin to get curious of God. Because some of the things that he would say, like, everything happens for a reason. Or, you're never alone. Stuff like that he would say to me, I would look back into the things that I had gone through at that time in the past and be like, well, if God was so great, why did he let me go through this? And so then for a short period of time, I remember thinking, maybe I wasn't born of God. Maybe I was born of the darkness. Maybe I was meant to be this dark entity of this world, and God doesn't like me. God doesn't love me. God doesn't know who I am because I don't know who he is. Because if God liked me or loved me, he wouldn't have put me through what he put me through. And I genuinely believed that for the remainder of my dancing career. I looked at myself as powerful in that industry. And I was a powerhouse. I was a blonde hair, blue eyed, plastic surgery dancer. I traveled the world. I got to see the world. I moved to Miami, and that was when my life came tumbling down. I was living in Miami, and King and I had gotten into a really big fight that placed him in jail. It wasn't anything to do, like, he didn't do anything to me, I didn't do anything to him, but he had a couple of warrants, and when the police got called from our fight, the warrants had came up and he had gone to jail. And when he got out, I had bailed him out. He didn't want anything to do with me for a couple of weeks, so he left and left me there by myself, which I made a really stupid decision to book myself a flight to Vegas to go work in Vegas for the week to kind of cool down. And one of my clients at the time was a really famous basketball player that was also going to be in Vegas during that time. And so we had agreed that I would go stay with him in his house out in Vegas. And everything happens for a reason, for real. I got on that flight, made it to Vegas. He picked me up, went to the house, and I told him that I was still going to be working in the clubs while I was there, but, you know, I would still be seeing him. And he said that was fine, that he would, you know, if I wanted to, on some nights, if I had been drinking too much or something, that he would book me a hotel or something near the club. And so one night, this is exactly what happened. I had drank too much at the club, and I couldn't make it back to where his house was. And so he had booked me a room near the club, and it was like a casino area. And I was such a greedy monster back then that even though I had made my money for being there with this basketball player, plus in this club, I still wanted more money. So I went upstairs, showered, changed, went back down and started working the casino. And I'll never forget, because this was when God came into my life heavy. Heavy. Well, God has been in my life. He had been in my life the whole time, but this is when God decided to just yank me out of stupidity. He was tired of me at this point. I remember I was down working the casino, and there was this gentleman that typically I would go after, successful looking guy with a suit at the ATM. So I went up to him and I introduced myself and asked him where he was playing, and he showed me to the table. I told him my pricing. He agreed to it, and I went over and sat with him at the table. About an hour later, he had asked if I wanted to go to the ATM with him so I could stay with him longer. I said yes. Went over to the ATM, and where the ATM was, there was a restroom right across the hall, and it was like this really narrow hallway. And so when we got to the ATM, I had turned my back, and the moment I turned my back, I felt him grab me by my hair and shoved me into the bathroom, where he then drugged me with something that was inside of a syringe. And I fought for my life until I felt this immense peace cover my body. I was still aware of what was happening, but I couldn't feel anything. And I just remember, I don't know, I've never been able to describe this without sounding completely insane. I remember this sound It wasn't of a man, it wasn't of a woman. It wasn't me. It was this calming sound that just said, I'm tired of watching you sabotage and hurt and be in consistent pain. You know who you are. Wake up. And the moment that I heard wake up, everything, all the pain, the hurt, the depression, the anger, the sadness, everything was right here. And I felt like I was having a heart attack. It was so intense and so painful that I just started screaming, which scared the person off. And I couldn't stop screaming. I couldn't stop. It was just coming, like, it was like, the more I screamed, it felt like it was like coming out. Like it was like this buildup of, and I just was screaming and screaming and screaming in this bathroom. And I know I probably scared hundreds of people. Don't know personally, but I can imagine people in the casino were probably thinking somebody was getting slaughtered. I was internally. And I remember falling asleep, waking up on this bathroom floor, which I'm a germaphobe now, so thinking of that really bothers me. But I was on this bathroom floor, woke up face down, and if you work out, you would understand this feeling. If you ever did like a really intense leg day, and you feel like your legs are so heavy that you can't put your feet up, that's how I felt. I felt so heavy. I felt like my arms were 100 pounds apiece. I felt like my body was just bricks. And I went back up to the room, grabbed my bags, went straight to the airport, and booked a flight back to Dallas, Texas to come back home. And my son was here. My son was in Dallas, and that's who I wanted to go see. I wanted to go see my son. And I made a lot of people mad doing that because I just disappeared. I literally didn't tell anybody where I was going. So mad that one of my clients that I had at the time had found out that I was back in Dallas, and the time I was staying in a hotel out here because I didn't have a place, that they had snuck into my hotel room, and I knew what he was trying to do, but I wasn't expecting somebody to come through the door and tackle me. So I had a giant makeup mirror that I hit him across the face with and broke his nose. And it saved my life. Not from him in particular, but me going to jail for 3 days for that got me. It was so crazy. I went to this jail, and there was a Bible on the bed. And so for 3 days, I read the Bible. And I still, I remember reading it and thinking to myself, I guess I can't read because I couldn't understand it. Like everything was so foreign to me. But I just kept reading it. Was just curious about it. And I remember praying for the first time. I remember praying and asking God if that was him in Vegas. I remember praying and asking God, why have you created me to be this monster? I almost felt like the Joker. The Joker is one of my favorite characters because you actually watch the movie The Joker, how he was a normal man, but bad things just kept happening to him, and they always pinned it on him and always made him the villain and all these things. And then sooner or later, he said, all right, you're right, I'm the villain, and just kind of went with it. I always related to the Joker. I always loved that movie, and I loved the Joker because I was like, oh, that's me. Like, I was always pinned to be the bad kid. I was always pinned to be the promiscuous woman, So I asked God, I was like, why have you cursed me? If you really love me, why would you put me through all these things? If you're so great and so mighty, why me? Why did you let 3-year-old me get locked into dog cages? Why did you let 8-year-old me get knocked out by my dad and then my mom tell me that I was lying? Why did 10-year-old me get raped by my grandfather? Why did 12-year-old me go to jail? Why did 15-year-old me get sex trafficked? Why? Why did I never get a break? Why couldn't I have just been a normal girl and go to prom, have a boyfriend, go get some ice cream after school, go to a daddy-daughter dance? So at the time, I didn't realize, but God had answered all of it. I think when people think about God, they think of immediate peace and light and softness. But I have a different relationship with Him. I think because God knows what I'm able to handle. And so when I prayed all that stuff to Him, He answered me, but He wasn't soft about it. It was the year 2019, at the end of 2019. And for 3 months straight, I couldn't get out of bed. I was having hallucinations and intense withdrawals and panic attacks every single day. I had hallucinations of me dying. I had hallucinations of my son dying. I cried every day, all day. And again, I was in an environment with my family that I had nobody to process anything with. At this point, my family absolutely hated me. So I was alone going through this. It was a lot. It was so much that it's hard for me to even describe now of just the intensity of what I was going through. It was an awakening. But one thing I can describe, because it was as if it was right in front of me, was I had a dream that I had died, and I had went to this place, and it's not how others describe heaven. Like when people describe heaven, they say it's bright and it's clouds and golden, and mine was bright. It was bright. It was sunny. It was warm. But it was this field with long grass and pink flowers that stretched for eternity. And I could feel the sun on my head, and it was a light that said, "Are you ready to accept me?" And I remember thinking in my dream, that's why it felt so realistic, because I could actually still hear my thoughts and my process, and I said, "I think so. I don't know though." But I think. Where are you going with this? And it actually laughed at me, like it was like laughing with me. And the light actually said, "I knew you had a great sense of humor. I'll see you on the other side." And then I woke up. And all that pain was gone. My anxiety was nearly gone. I wasn't having panic attacks anymore. Now, I was still a hypochondriac, and I was still a paranoid person. Like, I couldn't leave my water in a room by itself without me looking at it for too long, or I think somebody did something to it, so I would pour it out. I wasted a lot of water bottles back then. But I remember it was so funny too how it happened, but it just all went away. Like it literally was just like night and day. I just woke up from that dream and like everything was just. And then one day I was just out shopping, running errands, and this really attractive guy was on the other side of the grocery store. And I walked by him and he smelled good too. And so that was my opening to say, "You smell nice. What's the cologne you're wearing?" As if I was, I don't know. And he turned around to me and he told me what it was. I don't remember what it was because he was too good looking for me to pay attention to what he was actually saying. But I did hear that he introduced himself, and his name was Javian, who then became my husband. Javian and I met, and he was the first person that I just felt safe around. He was patient with me through all of my goofy paranoias. And I laughed, and my humor came back out with him, and all of these things. And he was the one who wanted me to go to church and wanted me to get right by God. And he wasn't perfect either. I mean, we both wanted to get right by God. But as our time passed, we got engaged, ended up getting a courtship marriage, and moved in together officially, got pregnant, and I thought that that was the start of the rest of my life, that God had forgiven me, and that I was going to live this dream life of being a wife and a mother and all this stuff, and I was ready for it. I was excited for it. I gave birth to my daughter, Kiara, and it was the happiest day of my life because even though we were in the middle of a pandemic, I had a man that loved me, a son that loved me, and now this beautiful baby girl in my life. I just never felt love like that before. He would not leave my side. He was a good man, and he was a good father. And then the unthinkable happened. He ended up cheating on me. And so we tried going through counseling, we tried fixing it, but he pretty much had admitted to me at that point that I was not healed. And it was him that kind of put in my head, because it was him that told me that I would probably never be a wife. Not because I'm not a good wife and I don't have good wife attributes, but because of my past and because of what I've gone through, that I'm not a pure woman. And so we started talking about divorce. I didn't want a divorce. I wanted to continue my life that I had dreamed of. But God also made it very clear to me that I did have a lot of healing to do in order for me to be able to live that life. And that man wasn't who he called me to be with. So the divorce happened. My daughter was 9 months old. I remember the kids and I living inside of a U-Haul truck for about a week, and I had to go back to the club to go make enough money to be able to get into an apartment. I worked for about 2 weeks. I was very strict with myself though. I was like, I'm only going to go in to get this money to get inside the apartment, and I'm done. I promise God I'm done. And I got to the apartment, and I just remember God coming into my life again, not gently at all. He's not gentle with me. He came in and swooped into my life And I mean, I'm talking about every day was a problem after problem after problem. Like, all of our stuff got stolen out of the U-Haul. Then the rest of the stuff that was in the apartment got stolen. And then it was just, I mean, everything, every day it was something. And I was just sitting there like, why won't you give me a break? Like, give me a break. Like, let me live. I'm just asking for a month. Give me 30 days of just chill, you know? And that's when I opened my door one morning and this flyer fell into my house. And I looked down at it and it said, "Dallas, we love you," by One Community Church. And I was looking at it and I'm like, okay. And I actually went to go throw it in the trash until I saw that it was Louisville. That one of the addresses was Louisville, and that's where I was living at the time. And it was kind of like there was some holiday or something that was about to be happening, and they were also advertising that like event. And so I was like, okay, well, all right, well, it'll give us something to do. So we went down the street to the One Community Church in Louisville. I walked in hoping for someone to see me, but also hiding in the crowd to hopefully somebody not see me, if that makes sense. If you're deep, you'd understand, but so we went, and I was just a random person in the background. I never tried to like have conversations with people. I mean, people were starting to recognize me, and my kids, but I just was always kind of like, okay, hi, because I didn't want people to know who I was. I just wanted people to know of me, see me, hi, be nice to me, but don't get to know me. You don't want to know my story. You don't want to know me. Until one day, I got baited. There was a coach that at this point I had gone through school, got my certificates in personal training, and started training out of a facility in Dallas. And there was a coach that I just really admired, and I looked up to him, but I was always too nervous to like talk to him. But one day I saw that he had posted on his Instagram about the One Community Church at the Plano location. And so my little clever business mind was like, I'm going to pull up to the Plano location to see if maybe I could try to connect with him and see if I could try to collab, because he has like all these followers on Instagram. He's got these, whatever. And if I can collab with this guy, it would help my business out a lot. So I came on a Sunday and I wore this bright green like outfit on. Again, kind of just in the corner. I was actually like scoping the room up to see if I could see him. And it was at the end of service, I'm walking, and Pastor Deshaun stopped me and said, "I like your outfit. What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a personal trainer." He's like, "No way. I have a personal trainer that I want to introduce you to." And it just so happened to be the person that I was trying to get connected with in the first place. And then that's when Pastor Deshaun had then expressed his vision to me about, hey, we're wanting to start this thing called Young Adults Get Fit, YA Get Fit. We've been praying over a female trainer. We have our male trainer. I would love for you and this individual to connect, get to know each other, and try to build this. And I remember thinking to myself, I am in no position to be a part of a church. I mean, I'm on my walk to Christ, but like I'm nowhere near where I need to be. I'm still very worldly in my ways. And I ended up connecting with this coach, and we started talking, and he was just like, "No, this is a great idea. I think you should get into it. Let's do this. Let's go hard with it." And through that journey, I have became a leader, not only with Young YA Get Fit, which we see an average of 100 people a Saturday. We've grown it so we've met some amazing individuals, plus I became a leader within a group. I actually lead a group now of young women. And I was baptized last October of 2023. And I now am able to share my testimony, not only with One Community Church, but with Denton County juvenile facilities. I volunteer my time at a couple of different places that go help the prostitutes down in Harry Hines to get them to follow Christ. And I've actually have saved King, my old pimp. I watched him get baptized last month. He is on his walk to Christ, and I have saved 3 young women who have gotten out of the sex industry and have also been attending One Community Church. So, yes, it has been a journey. It's been a long story, but my journey still continues, and I'm excited every day, and I'm excited to see what God has planned for the next 26 years of my life.
Who is Jesus to you?
Jesus is my most favorite thing to talk about, because the relationship that I have with him is deeper than I can explain. When I think of Jesus, when I first thought of Jesus, I thought of the romanticized version of Jesus, of this super kind and graceful, white-robed, bearded white guy in the painting. Until I actually read the story of Jesus and created this, and God creating this Picasso picture in my brain of what he actually was. Jesus loved us not because of who we were, and he didn't save us because of who we were, because if that was the case, we would not be here. He loved God so much. He loved his Father so much that he sacrificed himself, and he knew he was going to do it. But he continued to do it. And the reason why I get so emotional about that is because the reason why God doesn't tell us why when we ask him why, like me, when I asked him why, was because I don't have the mental capability to be able, if God told me that I would have to sacrifice myself one day, I don't know where I would stand. But Jesus, on the other hand, when he was told, and he did know, and he continued to do it, even though he was so scared that he was sweating blood, and he was in so much pain, and his last words were, "Forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Like, how could you ever compare to a love so great, to a loyalty so great? So Jesus to me is like the older brother that I look up to, that I want to be like, that I know that I will never be like. But he gives me inspiration to know that my life is a sacrifice, that my life is a sacrifice for God, and I'm supposed to be living for God, and that my love for God should outweigh the love for my life, and that's who I'm striving to be. Right? Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing myself this opportunity to express the internal and outternal experiences that I've had through my journey with you. I want to say thank you for every single moment in this life that I've had with you, that I have noticed that you have been there since the beginning, Lord. Thank you. Thank you so much that in this moment right now, whoever may be listening or watching feels your presence and knows that through all of the pain, through all of the triumphs, through all of the discontinuation or the discouragement or everything, that you were there. Even that stoplight that they didn't think, that they thought that they could get past, but it stopped them right in time, that was you, God, and to remind them to praise your name when that stoplight stops them. Lord, thank you so much for giving everyone this opportunity to continue to live for you, for the forgiveness that you've given us. For I don't deserve anything, but what you have given me, everything. The person who is watching this didn't deserve anything that has happened to them, or the good or the bad. They didn't deserve any of it, but what you've given it to them, because even with the bad, instead of looking at it in a negative light, you realize that even the bad is a lesson, because you knew how strong that individual was. You knew what that person was capable of, and you loved them so much that you were willing to put something in front of them to grow them closer to you.